Hello, and welcome to Book Circle. I'm Earl Weinberg. This time, we will continue our reading of Storm in the Village by Miss Reed. Chapter 9. The Vicar Does His Duty. Rumors about the proposed housing estate continued to fly about Fairacre, Beech Green, and the busy streets of Caxley. To begin with, opinions had been almost equally divided. Many of the Caxley shopkeepers, seeing a considerable source of income in the scheme, approved the idea. A number of the inhabitants of Beech Green and Fairacre agreed with Mrs. Cox that a more frequent bus service to Caxley, which must inevitably result from a greatly increased village population, would be of great advantage to them. The opponents of the scheme included those who disliked change of any sort, and certainly the change brought about by hundreds more people in their own secluded corner of the country. Those who were shocked at any desecration of Dan Crockford's landscape, and those who had the foresight to see that a great number of urban dwellers set down suddenly in a small rural community could cause more commotion than just the despoiling of a much-loved scene. But when the rumor of the new school, and possibly the closure of Fairacre's own village school, began to be bruited abroad, the opponents of the scheme found their numbers swelling. "Been up our school all my school days, and my father afore me. Catch me sending our two little uns all that way, bus or no bus," was the sort of comment one heard, delivered in a robust burr by staunch Fairacre worthies. One such remark particularly amused me. Mrs. Partridge overheard two parents discussing the project heatedly, and retailed it to me. "Well," said one with decision, "our Miss Reed ain't much to look at, poor toad, but her learns 'em fair enough, and I will say this for her, she don't bring 'em up in the wheels old Hope did us, do she now?" With which modest tribute I was well content. The vicar had pondered Mr. Maughan's advice about getting some official light on the matter of the school's closing. He was very much perplexed over the way he should go about it. Should he ignore the rumors and wait until an official declaration was made, as it must be, if there were any truth at all in the proposal? Should he call a meeting of the school managers to discuss things? Or should he say nothing, but approach someone in the education office at the county hall and feel the way? After much earnest thought, he had decided that he would go privately to his county town, seek an interview with the director of education, and let his fears either be put to rest or confirmed before meeting his managers. Accordingly, one overcast morning, the vicar set off in his shabby car along the shady lanes to his appointment. He drove alone, for not even his wife knew his business that morning, and he pondered many things as he rolled sedately along, hooting gently when he approached any bend, crossroad, or, more frequently, any new-fledged bird which sat, fearless and innocent, on the hard high road. Apart from his conjectures about the forthcoming interview, he was also sorely perplexed about a more personal matter. He had in his wallet a book token for 1 guinea, treasured from a recent birthday. Should he be extravagant and add yet another guinea to it and buy the new volume on the subject of George Herbert, the parson poet for whom he had such a high regard? He feared that might be an indulgence. His stipend was very small, and a guinea's expenditure was not to be undertaken lightly. His wife, he knew, would not hesitate to encourage him to buy it, selfless soul that she was. Yet only that morning she had told him that saucepans would have to be replaced, and that yet another sheet had been ripped from top to bottom by his own careless big toe. The vicar sighed heavily, discovered that he was now in a built-up area, dropped the speed of his car from 35 miles an hour to 25, and cautiously approached the education office. His appointment was at 11 o'clock, and at 5 minutes to the hour the vicar was ushered into a waiting room by a pretty young typist. "If you'll just wait," she said, turning such a dazzling smile upon the vicar that he felt quite young again, "I'll tell Mr. Temple that you're here." The room was oppressively quiet when she had gone. Mr. Partridge, crossing to a table which held an imposing spread of magazines and newspapers, was conscious of the noise that his black shoes made upon the bare linoleum. He felt acutely conscious and looked with lackluster eye at the literary fare set out for his refreshment. The Teacher's World, the Times Educational Supplement, the Schoolmaster, the Journal of Education, he supposed were right and proper things to find here, but his eye brightened as it fell upon the local paper. The first thing he saw when he opened it was a photograph of a fellow parson who was noted for his outspoken dicta on subjects of which he had the scantiest knowledge. "Dear, oh dear," said the vicar aloud, folding back the paper, "and how has poor old Potts put his foot in it this time?" Completely engrossed, his own troubles for the moment forgotten, Mr. Partridge was unconscious of the town hall clock, which boomed 11 times and was the signal for hundreds of coffee cups to appear on desks all over the county town. The pretty girl reappeared. "Mr. Temple can see you now," she said. The vicar dropped the paper, and, his head awhirl with poor Potts' inadequate book tokens, sheets, saucepans, and the plight of his adored village school, followed her to the door of the director's office. Meanwhile, the vicar's wife was paying a call at Fairacre School. The flower show was imminent, and she had come to see how the children were progressing with their dancing. The infants only were taking part in this particular activity, and I had given Miss Jackson a free hand in choosing some simple song and dance to amuse the onlookers. Somewhat to my dismay, she had unearthed a quite dreadful thing called the Song of the Roses, whose inane words echoed and re-echoed through our 2 classrooms as the interminable practicing went on. The words had been printed up on a blackboard for the past month in the infants' room. "We are little rosebuds gay, knitting, nodding through the day. Some are pink and some are white, some are clad in scarlet bright. See us scatter petals sweet, like confetti at your feet." After this had been chanted with various halts, cries of despair from Miss Jackson, false starts, and so on, the floorboards would begin to quake to the ensuing dance as the roses wove their way thunderously between each other. Light dust would rise from between the ancient cracks, and my class would groan heavily next door. This morning, however, Miss Jackson was taking a rehearsal in the playground. "I want someone to take a message to Miss Jackson," I said. Mrs. Partridge and I watched the effect of this innocent remark on the posture of all the children in the room. Shoulders were pulled back, chests thrust out, the eyes of every hue raised to mine with looks of mingled pleading and responsibility. Patrick was chosen to ask Miss Jackson if we might all watch the rehearsal, and as he skipped joyfully doorwards, the rest of the class relaxed their fierce posture and breathed again quite naturally. While we waited for Patrick's return, Mrs. Partridge told me of a further complication in the dancing program planned for the flower show. "Mrs. Waits has asked if Kathy can do her scarf dance again," she said in a worried tone. "It really is difficult." "What's the problem?" I asked. Kathy Waits had performed her scarf dance at more village functions than I cared to remember, and I wondered what the objection could be to her repeating it yet again. "Well, dear," said Mrs. Partridge in a very low voice, carefully turning her back to the class to foil any astute lip readers, "the last time Kathy did it was 2 years ago, and even then Gerald, and a great many other people too, felt that her costume was, well, inadequate, shall we say. And Mrs. Waits showed me the new one, and really, Mrs. Partridge's normally rosy face took on a deeper hue. "Nothing, my dear, but a few wisps of chiffon," she continued gravely, "and poor quality chiffon at that. And yet she's so keen, and a good churchgoer. It does make things difficult." Patrick returned as Mrs. Partridge sighed, and we all trooped out into the playground where the 15 or so infants stood about in positions of acute self-consciousness. At Miss Jackson's command, they shuffled into a faint resemblance of a crescent, Miss Jackson raised a plump arm, fingers daintily extended, and fixing her eyes upon her inattentive class, she sang very loudly, "Ready? We are little—" A bashful chorus took up the ditty in true country burr. "We are little rosebuds gay, niddin' noddin' all the day." Here the children shook their heads stolidly, their expressions wooden. A few fierce nudges and shovings resulted in 5 or 6 unhappy little girls stepping forward to say, "Some are pink." Here they stepped back with disastrous results among their fellows, whilst a few more were projected forward to recite, "And some are white." A group of bigger boys then took their place, shouting cheerfully, "Some are clad in scarlet bright." After this there was a short, embarrassed silence, until Miss Jackson, throwing herself forward and up again in an unlovely way, reminded them of the final couplet. Wielding their arms as though they were pitching bricks into a well, and panting with their exertions, the infants gasped out their last 2 lines. "See us scatter petals sweet, like confetti at your feet." We all clapped heartily at this performance, while I made a mental note to speak to Miss Jackson about curing the glottal stops which our children much prefer to the sound of tea. "Absolutely splendid," Mrs. Partridge said enthusiastically. The children preened themselves and exchanged smug smiles. "It's only just over a week to the flower show," she continued, "and I'm sure everyone will enjoy the dancing." Miss Jackson smiled graciously at this kind remark, but had a gleam in her eye that disturbed me. "It is for the children's benefit primarily," she began. "It is a wonderful release from the rigid type of exercise which they were accustomed to, and gives them freedom for true imaginative expression." She had just drawn a deep breath, preparatory to embarking, as I knew from bitter experience, on a tedious rehash of Miss Crabb's half-baked psychology notes, when St. Patrick's clock saved us by striking 12. The children broke into cries of pleasure. Mrs. Partridge remembered that she had cutlets to egg and breadcrumb. The dinner lady approached the schoolroom door, and Miss Jackson's monologue mercifully remained unsaid. The vicar had returned much relieved in his mind, and sitting on the veranda with a comforting pipe in his mouth, he had confessed the main purpose of his trip to his wife. "A most pleasant fellow," commented Mr. Partridge on the Director of Education. "An uncommonly pleasant fellow, sympathetic, intelligent, and gave me a very good cup of coffee, too." In the vicar's gentle eulogy there sounded a faint note of bewilderment, as though he had expected directors of education to have small horns and cloven hooves, and a whiff of sulphurous fumes emanating from them. "He has heard indirectly of the housing scheme, and says he feels sure that our parish council will know more about it before long." "But what about the school?" his wife asked anxiously. "Is it likely to close?" The vicar leant across and patted her knee comfortingly. "Evidently not, my dear. If a new school were to be built on the site, it's quite likely that Fairacre School would take infants only, and the juniors would go by bus to the new building." Mrs. Partridge put down a hideous straw hat she was embroidering with fearsome raffia flowers for the fancy stall of the flower show, and gazed thoughtfully across the garden. "It's a relief, of course," she said slowly, "to know that much, but the village won't like the idea. Anything touching the children rouses the village at once. I wish we knew more about this wretched business." The villagers of Fairacre and Beech Green had not long to wait before more was known about the wretched business. Catchley Rural District Council, having been notified of the proposed scheme, decided that here was a matter which might well prove contentious. "Better let Fairacre and Beech Green Parish Council know of this," said burly Tom Coates, the retired estate agent. "Let's hear what the feeling is out there before we send word back to the planning committee." It was agreed, and within 2 days Mr. Roberts the farmer, one of the parish councillors, was propping up on his kitchen mantelpiece the notice of the meeting to be held in the near future in Fairacre School. "And that should set 'em all talking," he observed to his wife. "If the fur don't fly from Mrs. Bradley, I'll eat my hat." His gigantic laugh rustled the paper spills on the shelf before him. The formidable and ancient Mrs. Bradley was a fellow councillor. Together they represented their parish council on the Caxley Rural District Council, and if parley were to be made, Mr. Roberts could have no better ally than Mrs. Bradley beside him. "Bless my soul," he continued, slapping his breeches with a hand like a ham. "That'll be a meeting worth going to." His eye brightened at the thought, for Mr. Roberts dearly loved a scrap, and it looked as though plenty of trouble were brewing somewhere. His wife observed this relish with misgiving. "Now, don't go saying anything you'll regret," she cautioned. "You remember that business over collecting the pig swill. You're too hasty by far." "I shall speak the truth and shame the devil," declared Mr. Roberts roundly. "And 'tis the truth that old Miller should keep what's his own, and 'tis the truth, too, that some of the finest growing land in the county and should never be built on." "Well, speak quietly, then," implored his wife as her husband's voice shook the bunches of herbs which hung from the kitchen ceiling. "I shall speak mild as milk," roared her husband, his hair bristling. "I shall coo at him like a turtle dove, but I'll coo the truth." He thrust his arms into his jacket, shrugged his massive shoulders into it, and made toward the door. His wife watched him go with a quizzical look. From across the yard she heard his voice raised in cheerful song. He was singing, "Onward, Christian soldiers, marching as to war," with all the zest in the world. Chapter 10. The Flower Show. The day of the flower show dawned with a brilliance which enchanted most of Fairacre, but which caused the weather-wise minority to shake its head. "Don't like the look of it," said Mr. Willett, mallet in hand. He was putting the final touches to the stakes which supported the ropes of the bowling for the pig site. Mr. Roberts was busy building a sturdy wall of straw bales near him. "Keep your fingers crossed, Alf," he answered. "If the wind turns a bit by noon, we may miss the squall." Mrs. Partridge and a bevy of helpers were pinning bunting round the produce and sweets stalls, and Miss Jackson, Miss Clare, and I were straining our thumbs by pinning notices at various vantage points to some of the hardest wood I had ever encountered. "Come out of Sir Edmund's old stable roofs," said Mr. Willett when I commented on our difficulties, "and weathered to iron almost. When this lot's over, I'm having a few of these beauties to make a little old gate. I'm looking forward to working with a bit of good wood." And a fine job he would make of it. I knew, looking at those sinewy old hands that gripped the mallet. They were probably the most skilled and useful hands in the village, I thought, cursing my own inadequate pair, which had just capsized the tin full of drawing pins into the long grass. I had seen Mr. Willett's hands at work daily on wood, stone, iron, earth, and tender plants. They were thick and knobbly, and stained in ribby nails edged with black, but I never ceased to marvel at their deftness and precision as they tackled the scores of different jobs, from lashing down a flailing tarpaulin in a howling gale to pricking out an inch-high seedling in its fine soil. The great marquee, which dominated the vicar's garden, was full of hustle and bustle as people carried in their entries for the flower show and walked round to admire, and sometimes to envy, the other exhibits. Mrs. Pringle had left the smaller tea tent conveniently placed near the vicarage so that boiling water was available from the kitchen, and had come to look at her son John's entries. She gazed with pride upon the 6 great bronze balls of onions, each with its top neatly trimmed, and laid at the side at exactly the same angle. His carrots, placed with military precision upon their tray, glowed with fresh scrubbed beauty, and a plate of white currants gleamed like heaped pearls. Mrs. Pringle's heart swelled with maternal pride until her eye fell upon Mr. Willett's entries, which lay beside her son's. There was little to choose between the size, quality, and color of both displays, but Mr. Willett had covered his tray with a piece of black velvet, a remnant from an old cloak of his mother's, and against this dramatic background his exhibits looked extremely handsome. "Black velvet, indeed!" exclaimed Mrs. Pringle scornfully to her neighbor. "Funeral bake-meats, I suppose, about all them poor things is fit for." Huffily, she made her way back to the tea tent with her limp much in evidence. By 12:30, all the preparations were completed. Mr. Willett's mallet had tapped every stake, and the stalls fluttered with their bunting above sweets, jam, bottled fruit, raffia hats, wool-embroidered egg cozies, and all the other paraphernalia of village money-raising. In the marquee, the air was languorous and heady with the perfume from sweet peas, roses, and carnations, and in the tea tent, rows and rows of cups and saucers awaited the crowd which would surely come. The sun still shone, but fitfully now as the clouds passed lazily across it. Mr. Willett surveyed the weathercock on the spire of St. Patrick's Church with a reproachful eye. "Get on and turn around you a bit," he admonished the distant bird, shaking his mallet at it and making Miss Clare laugh at his mock ferocity. She and Miss Jackson came back to lunch at the schoolhouse with me, and within 10 minutes Miss Jackson was setting the table and Miss Clare grating cheese whilst I whipped up eggs for 3 omelets. "Though I say it shouldn't," I shouted above the din, "I can cook a good omelet." "And I can't," confessed Miss Clare sadly. "I think I must get the pan too hot." She watched my preparations intently as I buttered the frying pan and finally swirled the mixture in. "You're probably too gentle," I told her. "You must be bloody, bold, and resolute when dealing with eggs. Master them or they'll master you." Luckily, my demonstration of egg management was thrice successful, and we sat down to a cheerful lunch party. Our conversation turned, naturally enough, to the flower show. Miss Jackson was anxious that the infants' dancing display should go without mishap. Miss Clare, as so often before, was going to play the accompaniment to the Rose Song and Dance, which I so heartily detested, on the vicarage piano. My 2 guests discussed the intricacies of timing and the best position for Miss Jackson to take up on the lawn so that both the children and their accompanist should see her. "Who's turning the music for you?" I asked. "Shall I ask Ernest to help you? He's a sensible boy." "Betty Franklin is doing it," answered Miss Clare. On hearing the name, Miss Jackson dropped her fork with a clatter. It rebounded from the edge of her plate and fell to the floor. Muttering apologies, Miss Jackson dived headlong after it. Her face remained hidden from view as she groveled. Miss Clare continued calmly, "I met the child with her aunt in Caxley last market day. They said they were coming out to the flower show, and I asked her then. She seemed a bit disappointed because she wouldn't be dancing with her old friends, but of course I thought that turning the pages might be some comfort." By this time Hilary had emerged from under the table with a very red face. Miss Clare, observing her discomfiture with one swift glance, turned the subject to the matter of the new housing estate. "Of course, those 2 men must have been surveyors, I suppose," she said, "and what a long time ago it seems since I saw them walking up and down poor old Miller's Field. I hear that it's going to be a really big affair." "With a site for a school already planned," I observed. I began to serve the raspberries, which I had picked early in the morning, but I felt Miss Clare's wise gaze upon me. "And Fairacre's plans?" she queried softly. There was the very faintest tremor in her voice, and I remembered with a sudden pang the 40-odd years which Miss Clare had spent under that steep-pitched roof, and of the scores of Fairacre men and women who had learnt their letters, their manners, and their courage from this devoted schoolmistress. "The vicar tells me that it won't close," I assured her. Her sigh of relief was music to hear. "But it may become infants only." I passed her the sugar and cream and set about filling Miss Jackson's bowl. "And your own plans?" she continued gently. For a moment I was at a loss to know what to answer, for my own plans in face of this project had perturbed me more than I cared to admit. "I should like to stay," I said slowly, "but I haven't had much experience with infants. The managers may prefer to get someone who is better qualified to teach young children." "What utter rubbish," declared Miss Clare roundly. "Fairacre will never let you go. Never." And with these few stout words, my long-sore heart was comforted. And we'll continue into the flower show next time.